Most OT networks in our buildings today were built on an assumption that turned out to be wrong, that those networks would never touch the outside world. The gear from that era might still be in the field, but that assumption's long gone. In this episode, Ping and I are joined by Fred Gordy and James Roberts to dig into where the real risk lives and where to start. I'm Ryan LaFlamme, and this is How to Handshake, Episode 7. This is How to Handshake, Episode 7, and today we're talking OT cybersecurity. Joining me here today is Fred and James. Quickly, just go around the room and ask you to introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do? We'll start with you, Fred.
Thank you. Glad to be on today. I'm Fred Gordy. I'm the SVP of Secure Connected Solutions at KMC Controls. What that means is basically KMC is really committed to the cybersecurity of their systems, but also the education of their SIs to help them learn to do this on their own. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to come over here is the commitment to cybersecurity.
And James, welcome.
Hi. Yeah, James Roberts. I currently work for Kelso Building Services. We're a kind of a big service offering company, HVAC, construction, plumbing, electrical, but our department mainly handles systems integration. And in my role, I'm OT cybersecurity protections leader, kind of a digital buildings protection leader for our group. I'm also kind of a head charge of the fault detection diagnostics offerings and the MSI division piece, which is the master system integration.
And as we were mentioning before we started taping here, I guess the two of you have known each other for quite some time and have a bit of a relationship between the two of you.
What is it? 25 years now?
Yeah, close. Yeah, at least
20, over 25 years, I'd say now. Yeah.
Excellent. So that should make for a great conversation. And if you're good with it, we'll just jump right in. As we mentioned, we're talking about OT security here. OT security often gets framed as if it's just IT security applied to a different network. But anybody who's actually worked on one of these networks knows it's not that simple, So what makes security a fundamentally different problem for OT than it is from the IT security that people are used to? And where does that sort of standard IT playbook start to break down?
Yeah, a couple of topics come to mind. One, IT optimizes for confidentiality, where OT is all about availability and physical security, different risk math and entirely there. And then in my example, a patch that's routine on a laptop can stop, that could stop a heating system or a life safety system, mid operation. So that's kind of where my head goes.
It's a big difference.
And then 100%. Yeah. I mean, to kind of continue the conversation on that, like you said earlier, James and I have known each other for a long time, but it's not just a matter of knowing. I mean, first I got to give him the credit, or maybe sometimes hit him in the shoulder. He got me in this business. I was an IT guy, and it was a shock to the system to come over.
And really, yeah.
Because like James said, confidentiality was my world. Availability was 100% the control systems world. But we also have been fortunate enough to work beside each other in several companies over the years, and we've done assessments in different places. And one of the ones, and James will know exactly who I'm talking about, is there's a group that their IT was caught unaware, and then let's just put it that way. And when we had reviewed the policy and written, and they basically kind of ripped our heads off. One of the guys said, we're not changing our patching policy. And I said, well, if you don't, then let me explain how it goes bad. I will say that I think that IT is getting better. They're at least listening better. I'm not saying they got it figured out, but
right. And that's been a reoccurring thing we've heard from past guests as well. That this was for a long time. There was a real gulf between the two, but things are showing like there are a lot of bridges starting to be built between the two, between IT and OT, and that's a kind of a good segue into our next question here. Building OT networks have, specifically the OT sides, have changed a lot in the last decade. We have web-based BAS front ends. We have cloud-hosted analytics platforms now. Our vendors have remote access tools of all sorts. And all of these have sort of punched holes in what used to be that closed, isolated environment for OT networks. So of those specific changes, which ones do you think have actually done the most, had the most impact? I don't want to use the word damage, but the most impact to sort of a security posture that a typical building would have. And sort of which of those do you think maybe gets unfairly blamed by the IT people for being a huge security risk?
But I got to say, hey, Ping.
There he is, yes.
IT sometimes gets into a rush to secure without understanding the environment they're going into. Again, this is a situation where James and I were working together, and we were working with the medical group, and they had operatory suites in these buildings. Well, an operatory suite requires you to monitor temperatures, pressure, so on and so forth. You can't just be blind to it. And they pushed out Java updates, and they locked out their HVAC system guys, not in one, but multiple locations, and they had to cancel surgeries for 2 days. So, James and I both got story after story where IT is just kind of trampled on top in a rush to secure, and as a result, cost himself a lot of rework.
Wow. Yeah. One comes to mind up in New York where they tried to run a quali scan on an OT network, and they probably crashed 80% of the building. And the IT playbook just doesn't translate well on the OT side. The assumptions don't hold. Right.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk about a recent article that we wrote late last year that was looking at some sort of, a roundup of real life cases where we've had sort of real impacts from bad data. So for us, that was bad data inside an OT system that caused things like HVAC failures, mold exposure, those sorts of things. That was an actual situation. We had seen that happened at the Seattle Children's Hospital. Google's Sydney office had their building management system sitting on the public internet, which was completely unpatched. And luckily, I think there were no deliberate attacks. If this is the kind of thing that can happen with a misconfiguration, what sort of thing can happen if somebody was to actually gain access, right? And so the question I have here is, from what you've seen in the field, do examples like these actually capture what's at stake, when control for an OT network is compromised like this? And how should we be thinking about the line between what's an accident or configuration drift and what may be a deliberate compromise by somebody outside?
Yeah, I mean, the example I have is not, it is a cybersecurity related event. And it is, once again, an internal insider attacker. It was a disgruntled employee who still had access to something, and they simply just went in and wiped out all the schedules. That's it. That's all they did.
Right.
The damage was quite severe. The repair, the remediation was very extensive. It took a lot of time. Unfortunately, didn't have backup of their schedules.
No.
Right? Of course not.
That never happens.
Yeah. So no one knew what they were supposed to be. So it took them up. So the change was, the insider attack was very simple. The remediation was very extensive. And the impact was quite simple.
Well, you kind of struck a nerve. When we kind of started down this pathway, James and I both came from a system integrator. And James and I both have kind of come back home, so to speak. But the one thing that just kind of sticks with me, and gets me on my soapbox, and I'm going to try to stay off of it, is...
That's okay. We like spicy opinions here.
Well, I got them. So throughout the entire time I've been doing this, and I think, Ping, you'll back me up on this, I've never gone after a manufacturer. I've gone after me. Because we cannot technologically build ourselves out of a problem with the system integrators who are not practicing good, basic cyber hygiene. The other thing too is, when an event happens, does it really matter what caused it at that time? The biggest problem is what I call response paralysis. And what that means is nobody's planned for it. And like you were talking about the backup Ping, James and I had situations where the backup was 5-6 years old, and many changes have been done since then. Or there's another case where somebody backed a virus up. So
I've never heard that one. That's a good one.
Books.
So James, I'll hush there. I mean, I know he's got a lot of them too.
Yeah, I mean, we try, as part of our services, we try to enable single sign-on for every service we enable. But, that line between accident and attack is almost invisible from the inside of the system. Same bad value, same consequence, right? If you can't monitor, if your monitoring can't tell you why a set point change, it really doesn't matter whether it was on purpose or it was a bad config push, right? So continuous monitoring is the piece that, we push. It's a policy thing where you should be doing deep packet inspection right there on your network. You should look at those and detect, it's all about that anomaly detection. So if something's happening out of the ordinary, flag it so you can act quickly. But, that's kind of where my head goes for that. But if we can push that to a customer, that's what we recommend is to really.
That leads me to a question for both of you.
Okay.
Fred, James, we get asked often, where do we start, right? So especially for organizations who aren't far along the cyber framework route, where do we start? It's daunting, right? Like looking at, where do we start?
It's not. And I've kind of, because, we've all been on this journey, you, me, and James, and over a decade now.
Yes.
And it was daunting. It is daunting. I'm not trying to simplify it. But there are 3 questions that I'm a broken record about when somebody comes to me and says, what do we do? And I ask them, do you know what you have? Do you know how it's connected? And do you know who has access? They can't answer most of the time all 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, and I know you guys see this too, Ping, where you plug up to the network and they thought they had 10 devices and they got 22. But to go back to your example of the person that had access and was disgruntled, that we in our industry don't handle users like IT does, and we can't exactly handle them like IT does. But I'm going to pick on the company after James and I, went our different ways in companies. The one that I worked for was a decent sized mechanical contractor. You know who I'm talking about. When I got there, they had started their automation controls business in 1998. I came on in 2006. There were past employees, current employees that had one username and password.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an economic reason for that, because guys come and go. And this particular company I worked for had thousands of these systems. So if you get a new guy, you can't run out and put him in the architecture back then. You couldn't put them in 2,000 systems. So we all got the username and password. But if you map that out and show people that own, say, 100 buildings, and we say, okay, if you have 6 systems, you have roughly about 48 people that have access 24/7 to your system. Multiply that times 100, and they're like, I had no idea. But that knowing who has access, knowing how it's connected, and knowing what's there, that inventory piece, you can start there, and that's a cheapie.
That's happening. Yeah.
And that's a really important point. Obviously, those are ground rules. I think, I think you called it. It's cybersecurity hygiene, and this is a major difference that I've seen as well, coming from an IT to an OT side. Is the devices in OT networks are a much wider gamut. We've got older devices with no built-in authentication. We all know BACnet has no encryption, meaning, basically anyone who can touch the OT network can touch all the OT network and possibly any other part of your entire IT network. So that said, there are a few options on the table for protecting OT gear. We're talking, and I know, Ping, you're a big proponent of tight network segmentation. The idea around legacy devices being segmented, OT monitoring in real time, continuous monitoring, and, the idea of protocol fixes like BACnet SC, right? That's baking in authentication and encryption into the protocol itself. I'll drop a little link here where we spoke with Nate Benish about BACnet SC. And that was a great conversation. But so I guess I'll toss this out to you, Fred, first. What sort of, is there a combination of these that actually work in the field for, if we were talking responsibility just for the OT segment?
All right. Well, adoption rate is terrible for anything in our industry, just keeping it real, because when you're not in a non-federally regulated or, regulated industry, it all comes down to dollars. So there has to be a reason to do it. And there is no ROI per se for what we do, but there is a thing called operational interruption. How much does that cost you? If a building is dumped and it's empty for days, what did that cost you? So if you start looking at it from an operational resilience standpoint, not just cybersecurity, and you hit somebody with that question and say, look, you don't have to tell me, just go back and you guys do the math. What is it going to cost you if you can't have the people in the buildings?
Right.
Then on BACnet SC, I think it's a great aspiration, and I think it's moving forward. But, my world is 90% brownfield. And you can't tell somebody, rip out your network and put in this, all your BACnet stuff and replace it. Same thing applies. It's about money.
Mm-hmm. James, is that sort of the same thing you've seen?
Yeah, segmentation is a good floor. It's not, it's not the ceiling, of course. It buys you time, but it doesn't really just stop a determined actor that's already inside your network. That's something you got to really, keep in mind there.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of BACnet SC, there's real progress and adoption, but it's, what we're seeing, most field controllers won't be retrofitted. They'll be replaced on a normal life cycle, and that just doesn't happen. People are not going to rip and replace a working system out to replace that. They're going to deal with the security as it is. I see, BACnet SC is more of a 10-year kind of a rollout problem. Segmentation and going back to that monitoring is what, you're deploying this quarter. Mm-hmm. That's where you're going to get your wins, in terms of security right now.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think BACnet SC is a great technological advancement for BACnet. I think BACnet SC is going to do really well, almost as a replacement for VPN, like to the edge of your isolated network, whatever that is. But to rip and replace everything inside that brownfield is just not economically feasible. But we're picking one out, and you used to have a BBND there. You replace it with one that's SC enabled, and then the rest of it you isolate it. And then I want to double down on what James said there. I think monitoring, knowing what's happening, right? And that's those three questions that Fred is asking. Know who has access to it. When is the access? Know what it's doing. And then the third one is just training, because I think humans have a pretty good sense of like, hey, something feels different. And letting humans realize that feeling is worth chasing. OT systems should not behave differently unless it's intentionally changed. And I think that's one of the most valuable insight of the difference between IT and OT. So I think, isolation, BACnet SC at the edge as an entry point, and then monitoring, doubling down what James said there. And then that monitoring doesn't have to be complicated. Just measure what you do right?
I wanted to circle back to something that was mentioned just a little bit earlier, and we were talking about vendors and remote access. And we know that every building has at least one vendor with a remote connection. And the security posture of some of those is, as you said, a lot worse than a lot of people think. One credential shared amongst 40 people, and this might be reiterating what we already talked about, but how common is that still today? And what, more importantly, does good vendor remote access look like? And I think this could probably be pretty informative for some of our listeners who probably face this same issue and may not know where to or how to address it.
Before I pass it on to Fred and James, I just want to add that it's a fact that there are more remote access now than there were 5 years ago and more than 10 years ago. And that's not going away. We are working in a digital world, so I don't care what you think. Remote access is here to stay.
There's an economic reason for it.
Huge economic reasons. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
James, this is James Lane. I mean, he's working on some pretty cool stuff.
Over to you then, James.
Make a shameless plug here. Kelso's building a remote ops center just for this purpose, and part of that is secure remote access as a service. We're deploying Zero Trust at the edge, so we can offer and push more services to the customer, like secure remote backups, doing endpoint management, endpoint monitoring, and just managing that entire relationship, triaging alarms. That's part of it. But deep packet inspection at the edge, continuous monitoring. So what does good look like? It's per technician identity, it's per session approval, it's time boxed access, it's full audit trail. And that's kind of what you get, when you really deploying, remote access correctly. That's where I'll kind of leave it there. Zero trust principles,
Zero trust.
Never trust a connection just because it's a vendor.
Would you mind elaborate a little bit more about the concept of zero trust? I think a few of us we're familiar with it, but I think for the listeners, the concept of zero trust.
It's
how to trust it.
Gateway. If your gateway is at the edge, and it's basically outbound only, right? So in going back to that per technician identity, it's all about locking it down to that person's identity, right? Mm-hmm. So having that fingerprint of that user's machine, their identity, and their multi-factored access. You're basically bringing multiple methods of credential validation to that level.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of based on the idea that just because it might be Ryan's laptop logging in, it might not be Ryan.
Exactly.
On the laptop. I don't have a name for this, but there's a framework that I've seen mentioned. It's sort of making the rounds for auditing a smart building's OT security. And I think you touched on this. It's the what do you have, how is it connected, and who has access, right? And by some estimates, 90% of building owners cannot confidently answer that question. So anyone feel free to jump in here, but walk our listeners through what it actually takes to get a real answer on all of those. Is this just purchasing 3 pieces of software? Is this completely changing your culture inside of your department at work? Which of these approaches today could actually work to create that sort of those 3 levels of visibility without, say, completely crashing, the 30-year-old controllers that are running on an OT network?
And you had a smile. Does that mean you have?
No, it's because I was smiling because for those who, I met Fred because I was asking Fred to teach me about cybersecurity. And I think we met at the first iteration of the NIST framework, with the 5 pillars. And so I was smiling because it just took me back like 10 years, I think. And by the way, I still use those 5 pillars.
Well, they're good.
Yeah,
they're good.
Do you want to mention what those 5 pillars are for the people that may not know?
Yeah, sure. It's assets, so know what you have, right? It's protect, so firewalls, whatever. It's detect, so know how things are working, and then there's response and recovery. And those 2, we haven't talked much about it, and I want to dive into it. But when you have to look at how to respond and how to recover. But yeah, those are the 5. Yeah, am I correct, Fred?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I still believe NIST has got some good things. I mean, they did come up with 882, which is an OT standard. They have Rev 3, and I recently got asked to be a part of the technical working group along with MITRE that is doing the revision 4. But at the core fundamental, and this is the thing that the asset owner needs to wake up to, and the system integrator, is that there's asset owner responsibility, and that is ultimately the person who is responsible and going to be liable for whatever happens. Now, we've lived in a 40 years of nobody's really responsibility. Well, ISA says asset owner, you're ultimately responsible. Service provider, you have responsibilities that you're beholden to the asset owner. And then the system design is in that mix as well. But if you stop and look at it, and I did a 6-part series on this for vendors to go from being a vendor to a risk partner. And what that means is you need to you have the most system knowledge. You have the most knowledge of your the devices and everything. So you can help the asset owner understand these complex things of responsibility. Just because you're not practicing this, you are in the path of the bullet as a system integrator, because when they, it all boils down to, I know maybe it's a little bit different in Canada, but in the U.S. we have a thing where it says it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, it's just who has the most money and meanest attorneys. So,
it's the same here.
The bottom line is responsibility and liability is owned by the people that have been doing this for 40 years, and they're not aware of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with Fred on the 62443 is probably the best. It is the only standard out there. Everything else is just a framework, and it is a shared responsibility model. I like it because it does get everyone on board. It gets the manufacturer, the system provider, as well as the end user, the customer, asset owner, to kind of in the same room to agree to, be mindful of that security email piece as a whole. So yeah, I would say too, back on that, assessment is probably the best way to get a good look at what you have to start with. Invite a consultant to come in and do an assessment, but it doesn't stop there. It goes back to that continuous monitoring and being able to detect what's on that wire and build an asset list, because it changes tomorrow. Once you have an assessment, that's a snapshot, right? The next day goes by, something else is added. You have to know what's being placed on that wire in real time before you're going to have a good answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. And so a solid action for somebody coming out of this, you would say, James, is get somebody in to help you. Get somebody to
get somebody in that can help you and put a plan together, because the thing about 62443, it's a continuous assessment process. You figure out what's the worst, what stinks the worst, and then you fix that. Then you start again, and they go for the next layer. It's like an onion until you get to the end and you start all over.
And then you start over.
Take away there.
One of the things James and I both kind of preaching over the years is, come on, SIs, y'all need to wake up, because one day you're going to be facing the asset owner who is armed themselves. And so recently I got the honor, opportunity, whatever you want to call it, it's become a SANS instructor. And if they have customers that we all know, I could say names, I'm not going to, but guess what I'm teaching them? How to assess their own building systems. So stop and think about that. There's one that my first class is 150 of their facility peoples that are going to be assessing their systems. And then going back to the SI and saying, here's a punch list, here's a problem list. That now, obviously, the vendor is not responsible for doing it free of charge, but there are some things he may be asked to do. But the bottom line is it puts you in a bad light. Why have you not been doing this stuff? Let me say this. When you go do a SANS course, it ain't cheap. They're doing 150 people at about $7,000 a pop. They're serious. So
this big investment.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that the price of the admission is a lot cheaper than an actual breach and event, because once you're going to pay to recover from something like that, I mean, it's peanuts compared to what it's going to cost you to recover from a cyber attack that leaves you with ransomware and an encrypted system that you can't recover from. You don't have backups. That's just disastrous. And the cost of an assessment and the price of admission to Fred's course he was talking about, that's minor in comparison to those.
Absolutely.
But that does bring up a question I was going to ask you. I don't think in our conversation today we talked about the balance or the evaluation of the cost and the risk factor. Like a hospital, we don't even need to name one. Any hospital cyber event could be devastating, absolutely devastating, right?
I mean, yeah. I keep going back to James and I, but I mean, we have history and we've worked with people that are in cybersecurity in other fields like ICS. And they're like, we don't understand why this isn't mandatory. Well, it's not. It's not mandatory. And so every situation, when we go in and do an assessment, we have to take those things into consideration. Bottom line is you have to right size your cybersecurity.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely different levels of risk associated. And what I like to use is the ROI of recovery. If you're doing things right, if you're doing the best complicated controls monitoring, if you've got good backups, good disaster recovery, instant response, that recovery is going to look a lot different from someone who doesn't have that. That's where your ROI comes in. That's where you regain your investment from the cyber protection that you're deploying with.
I'm a building owner. I'm a facility manager. What should I be telling my vendors or the IT team that I work with? If I had to say, look, I need you guys to focus on this, what would be your piece of advice for those facility managers?
Take it away, James.
Phishing to OT impact, case that's
good at that, by the way.
Yeah. we like to do a lot of phishing exercise campaigns, a lot of cybersecurity awareness training for the directed specifically for the facilities teams and staff. Interesting.
Well, that's good.
So we would gear that. We would send you a flyer from KMC Controls offering you a free Starbucks gift card if you fill out our survey.
Yep.
Click. Yeah, I get a 98% click rate on that one. And another one, really sneaky one is hey, I'm your boss. You haven't filled out your security compliance training yet. What are you waiting for? Get you every time. I'll get 100% click on that one. It's just about good hygiene.
Secure remote access, those kind of things are so lacking in what we do. Even asset management is non-existent. User management, non-existent.
Techs checking their Gmail on a BMS head-end computer, right?
We've seen that a lot.
Yeah. What is the example that I think I saw, Fred, was one that perhaps you had talked about in the past. I wrote it down. A commercial building where a single phishing email opened by a technician on a computer that controlled multiple building systems took the building non-operational for nearly a week, and it took 92 days to fully recover.
It was one building, but it was a financial... It was an impact. But I mean, and that's 100% avoidable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't use the head end to check Gmail.
Yeah. But at the same time, I want to just counter that. I think one of the things that I face a lot is educating that a closed loop system does not mean it's secure. Right. And
speak my language.
Also, just to say that, well, it's not connected, therefore I'm not worried. Oof.
Can you
explain
that a little bit? So, because a lot of OT people may not understand what you mean by like a closed loop system and why. Yeah. So can you explain?
Yeah. So closed loop typically means it has no connection to the internet, but it really just means that it's self-contained, right? So, first of all, I think there's very few true closed loop system. There's almost always one PC that bridges between the IT network and the OT network. So it's not truly closed loop, number one. But I think often the sense of false false
Security.
that say, oh, my system is closed loop, therefore I don't need to worry, leads to lack of updates, lack of monitoring, lack of understanding, because it's just like, well, it's a closed room. I don't need to worry about it. And that we fight with that all the time. And sorry, James, just last thing, like I had a heated argument with someone at a conference around how MSTP, backlit MSTP is not more secure. It is more obscure, but it is not more secure. And it just kept going back and forth. And I had to concede, yes, it's less people know about it, but they have almost no tools to monitor MSTP network. I can name you 50 tools that are free if they're IP connected.
Right.
Anyways, I just want to, like, that idea of like, don't check your email on the head end. Yes, 100% agree. But the solution to that is not to not put it on the internet and to have that false sense of security because it's not connected.
Yeah, we say security through obscurity is not security.
Yeah.
It's not exactly. Yeah.
Well, every standard that's out there says you have to monitor. So when somebody tells me we have an air gap system, I just look at it. I used to not say it with this amount of confidence, but I do now. So that just means you're not watching it. That doesn't mean you're secure.
You don't care about it.
You know who one of the worst offenders are? I'm probably going to get hateful comments to me. Elevators.
That's all right.
They're the worst offenders.
Elevators.
Because, and James and I have seen this time and time again, they say, the people are saying, well, our elevator's not connected. We don't have them on our network. But you open the door, there's a cell modem there.
Bells and whistles that came in the last last few years too, for dispatch systems, things that have been attached to them, and it's putting them on the network that like they never were before too. So yeah, those guys are a little bit arrogant when it comes to their assessment questionnaires. So
this might be a redundant question, but who owns or who should own the OT security? And we all know finger pointing is like a favorite hobby in this industry. But is it facilities? Is it IT? Is it a third party vendor? Is it all three? What does a good alignment look like?
I'll start and I'll leave it to these guys, but it is not the vendor. I just want to come back to what you said there. Who's owning the security of your OT system or your OT whole thing? It is not third party. It is not your integrators, not your consultants, not your contractors, not your vendors. They need to be part of it, but they're not owning.
Well, they can be part of the solution because they have the most knowledge, but they don't own the risk. They shouldn't own the risk. Mm-hmm. Now, I do have very strong opinions about that, but to put it simply, is the asset owner is the ultimate responsible, and they need to use everybody needs a seat at the table that matter. And there is somebody from IT, there is somebody from the C-suite, and there is definitely people from the facility side. And too many times it's like, oh, we'll just tell the facility guys what we're doing.
Right.
That's the worst mistake you can make.
Mm-hmm. James, you agree?
Ownership works best when it's a shared model with one clear, accountable owner, really. That's going to be facilities. It's going to be the property management piece that owns that piece for sure. Good alignment looks like kind of a joint risk register, not separate IT, OT, risk, risk lists that never talk to each other, basically. That doesn't need to happen for sure. They need to be in the room. They need to cooperate.
You got the most experience.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the facility guys got the most experience on how to run their systems.
Security sets the framework. Facilities kind of define the operational guardrails of what you shouldn't touch and do, but both need to sign off on those exceptions.
I find it so interesting, Ping, that we just keep these conversations, these discussions always seem to come back to the idea that it's like, these guys just have to get in a room together. It's sooner is better. As Doug from Dartmouth said, we just get everyone in the room and order pizza and just start talking,
Yeah. I want to just highlight what Fred said there, because for the listeners, I think it comes down to who owns the asset. If your business owns properties, then the owner's likely facilities. I have one final question for both of you. Again, this industry has been talking about cybersecurity since 2012, right? Very, 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 very seriously. When we first started this conversation, for those who wanted to do something, they couldn't find a budget for it. Has that changed? Are we seeing more investment?
Say yes, because of what I'm saying is, if you're training 150 people to start, to assess your system, there's an investment there. Granted, they are a larger entity. But there are people that are really thinking about the operational impact, not cybersecurity, the operational impact. Well, guess what? What James and I do, aid that operational resilience. I mean, I'm not going to say there's buckets of money out there. It's not, but it's better, in my opinion. I don't know, James may have a different opinion, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, just small things too. Like we talked about, smaller sites, skip that platform play for now, fix the boring basics first. And then, most incidents trace back to one of those boring basics that got skipped, right? Asset inventory before everything else. You can do that. You can send a guy around to collect data around, your site to figure out what you got. Well, yeah, I'm seeing more of an awareness there, but it's still, I think we still have a way to go before it always comes back down to that,
That's perfect. And I think that's probably a perfect spot to wrap this up. Gentlemen, please, thank you so much for joining us today. Fred, James, where can people find you online?
If you go to KMCcontrols.com and go into the, right now I'm sitting under the consulting tab.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do that or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm Fred Gordy. I'm easy to find. And I try to make sure I respond to everybody.
Perfect. And James.
Yeah, you can find us, find me at Kelso Industries. Just look us up on the web. We're easy to find there. Same path though. LinkedIn. I have a daily intelligence brief I put together for our industry every day. So if you want to know what's happening today or tomorrow, in the cyber world about products and things in your building that might be vulnerable, give it a read. You might be surprised. You probably have something.
I'll be subscribing right after this call. I think that's great. Most of the time, those IT bulletins or security bulletins are just IT focused. So to have a resource for OT is quite valuable.
But you got to read it every day because I don't ever repeat myself. It's only a 1 day window, so it slides. Whatever happened 2 days ago is 2 days ago.
It's history.
You just have to go look at my archive to see that.
Well, also LinkedIn, Camps.
I dump it daily on LinkedIn, and if you DM me and connect with me and ask for the full briefing, I'll put you on a mailing list or send it right to you through the DM.
Well, we'll leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Ping, thank you once again. And we'll see you all soon. All right. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank y'all. We appreciate being on.
Take care.
How to Handshake was created by Optigo Networks. You can find us on YouTube and at optigo.net. Tune in 2 weeks for the next episode.